Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on? I'm going back.
Welcome back, everybody. The Bacon and Egg Show, episode number 63, September 19th, 2021. October coming up right around the corner. Jay, what is going on?
What's up, man? Hey, I'm doing a little bit better this Sunday than I was the previous one. Good effort from Longhorn football last night. Exactly the type of response that I needed to see. It's Rice, but that's what you need to do with Rice, man. So ready to discuss this and talk about what's coming up in the Big 12 a little bit. So how are you, man? Everything good with you?
Yeah, good. I think, like you said, what a way to bounce back after last week's, ass kicking in Fayetteville. I think and again, you mentioned it, it's Rice, but you play who's in front of you. You just handle business. In previous years, we've seen Texas teams kind of screw around with these teams that they should be putting away and should be finishing, and I think for Texas, just go and handle business is all they needed to do. But I think it was an emphatic performance the way that they did it. So yeah, let's get into this, man. Let's talk about it because the league play is coming up in a week.
Yeah,
And,
a man once said that you can't expect to beat Rice every season. That was not this season.
Former Big 12 championship winning coach said that.
Yeah, it was not this year, man. Texas looked the part. Texas definitely looked the part. Let's dive in, man.
Yeah, so 58-0 win. First shutout for the Texas football team since 2017 against San Jose State. Someone mentioned that came off of a Maryland loss, so a bounce back kind of shutout victory there. But I think this is a different kind of setup than that 2017 team, who turned out to be a decent team. But still, let's get into this. Let's just some general stats I kind of want to hit on before we kind of get into like the offensive and defensive sides of the ball and kind of break this down a bit. Total offense last night, Texas put up 620 yards to Rice's 284. They were averaging 10 yards a play. Texas was. I mean, and on top of that, they kept it clean. Only 2 penalties for 12 yards the entire night.
Love that.
A clean game. This is kind of what we were talking about after the Louisiana game, was a focused, clean, disciplined football game. I know Casey Thompson, we'll get to him in a minute, had a turnover, but other than that, like a pretty well played football game by the Horns. What are your thoughts on kind of the overall picture about this performance and what it kind of signified to you? What were some things that stood out in the general sense from this game last night?
I think the efficiency that they played with, especially through the first 3 quarters before they really took the foot off the gas. There was the third down conversions, 7 out of 10. The fourth down, especially on that opening drive, just understanding that we're going for this here and we're going to go score. Converting a couple of fourth downs, and the only fourth down they didn't convert was at the end of the game when they were literally just running the clock out and decide we're not going to do anything else. Let's just run and see if we can get it. I like that efficiency there. I like the fact that Cameron Dicker never had to punt. No punts. To me, that's a sign that you're efficient, that you're taking care of business. Like no punts. That was wonderful. That's the type of a statistic that you want to see against a team like Rice, against a team that you should handle the way that they handled. Were there some deficiencies that are still there? Were there some questions that weren't answered? Are there some riddles that still need to be solved? Yes.
Yeah.
But in terms of what it looked like on the stat sheet, it's exactly what you want it to look like. So from the big picture perspective, being able to take care of business in that regard is the most pleasing thing about all of this for me, was that aside from the one turnover early on, which we'll hit on, of an extremely clean game from this Steve Sarkisian-led football team, and that's what I needed to see, at least coming off of an extremely sloppy, unorganized looking, sort of a shell-shocked loss in Fayetteville, Arkansas. So yeah, it was big picture wise. This is exactly what needed to happen.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Let's get into kind of the main story leading into this game, and that was Casey Thompson's first start, first of his collegiate career. And I think, we discussed this last week about kind of what we were thinking about the quarterback situation going into this game. Would it be Card with the opportunity to start against a Rice team and maybe get his confidence back up? Would this be Thompson? Did he kind of earn that from what he did late in that Arkansas game? Well, Thompson got the start. And while the numbers don't jump off the page at you, I mean, he, completed only 15 passes for 164 yards with 2 touchdowns. Good night. But, we're not talking about, a 400-yard effort or anything like that, because he didn't have to, which is another thing we'll get to. But yeah, minus the one interception, I was really, really happy with what I saw from him. And the interception, okay, I mean, that was there was pressure, looked like, ball deflected, however you want to call it, and it just got up there but it is what it is. I was really happy with how he played. I think we discussed this, kind of on our group text last night about, like, for me, like, he looks like he has it. And it's that kind of that classic intangible kind of thing where, like, if you didn't watch the game last night and you see his stat line, you go, is that really, was that really that good of a night? I mean, I know he looked efficient, 15 of 18, but, like, is that better than what Card did against a top 25 Louisiana team on opening day? But I think if you watched him, it looked good. Like, his decisiveness, the way that when he gets into trouble, he's quick in his decisions. He knows when to bail. He knows when to use his legs. He's an aggressive runner. He's not hesitant. And that's extremely encouraging. And that's where I mean, I think he's earned himself another start. I think he is the starting quarterback against Tech next week. What do you make of how Casey looked last night and kind of this quarterback situation going forward?
Yeah, I thought he looked great. I think decisive is the word that we were using in the stands last night. It was a matter of, okay, this isn't there, this isn't there. I know that Denzel Okafor isn't going to be able to hold his guy for any longer in pass protection, so I got to take off, sort of thing. Like, this is the decisiveness is what is going to make this offense successful, because with the schematics that go into this, with the way that Sarkisian is going to get guys open, it's either going to be here, or I'm gone, and it's that quick decision making that is going to determine whether or not this team wins 9 games or wins 7 or 8. I feel, because it's going to be, it's that thin of a line right now with this team, because against Rice's defense, you don't really learn a ton, right? You don't really learn an awful lot about your team unless it's negative. And I think that we didn't come out of this game thinking or knowing anything that we didn't already know about this offense, and that we didn't already know about Casey Thompson coming out and leading that scoring drive right away from the bowl game when he played until that point. What was it, like 10 straight scoring drives?
Yeah, some kind of absurd number.
And then all of the superlatives, all of the reasons that people are talking about Casey Thompson being the guy at this point were all of the reasons that I thought he was going to be the starting quarterback coming out of camp. The leadership, the fact that the guys look like they want to play for him, the fact that he's been on campus, that he just looks more comfortable playing the role. All of those things were the reason that I thought he'd be the guy coming out of fall camp. Now, it didn't work out that way, but I think whether it doesn't matter necessarily what route you take to get to where you need to go, as long as you get there.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I don't know that I am completely bought in on Casey Thompson at this point. But what I
Right.
do buy into is the fact that in this current moment, he's the right guy for this job. And it showed last night in spades with the way
Exactly.
that he led this team up and down the field. The interception wasn't great. He did take a shot. It was just an ugly ball that just floated up into the air. And those sort of things are going to happen, especially with quarterbacks that don't have a ton of experience and that have offensive lines whose pass blocking is suspect. I mean, this is when you're trying to make a play for your team in that spot. And I know what he's trying to go deep. He's trying to hit one of those long crossing routes across the middle and make a play for his team. And he shouldn't have thrown that ball, but it happened and they immediately rebounded and he didn't make another mistake the entire time he was in there. So long story short, he does look the part. And I agree with you that he's earned the right to be this. He is, to me, he's the starting quarterback for the University of Texas. With that being said, they're going to need Hudson Card at some point this season. They're going to need Card to be able to step in and play. It's going to happen. It just you can count on a couple of fingers the amount of seasons that this Longhorn football program has gone through without needing a second quarterback, and in the last 20 years. And they're going to need Card, but for now, Thompson's definitely that dude.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where we talk about him like kind of earning that start. It for me, I'm with you. It's the same. Like, I don't know if I'm completely bought in on it. It's the like, okay, he's done what he's needed to do. I think if he does similar work against Tech next week, then obviously he's starting against TCU. And I think if he beats TCU and he puts up well, even if he just has a great, a decent performance and plays well against TCU, because there's other factors that can go into that game that may not lead to a Texas win there. But if he plays well against TCU, then to me, it's kind of like the leash gets longer kind of thing. It's like, then he can probably afford to have a bad start and still maintain that job. I don't think he's at that point yet. Like, if he has a bad game against Tech, then I think, it could be Card again kind of thing. So, we'll see. I mean, it's the up and down, it's the in-season quarterback battle. So, but let's hit on a couple more things with the offense here. You mentioned how he was under pressure. I think, we've kind of seen now, we're 3 weeks in, what this offensive line is. I think we know what they are. And I don't think this is a plus unit right now. I don't think it's going to be this season. It's a personnel thing. I just don't think that the players are there. I mean, Sark and Flood are going to address this through recruiting and through development. So this is something that's going to have to take time to really like pass judgment on how they do with building an offensive line. I just think they're playing the hand that they're dealt. And I just don't think it's that good of a hand.
I agree 100%. This is they're just having to play with what they can play with. And I think Sarkisian's offense can be, it's made to be able to adjust to those things. He can run different parts of this scheme to play to what the strengths of his team are. And it's run blocking, first of all, because I know I took a shot at Okafor earlier for his pass protection, but when you put him hat on hat and have him going forward, he's a bulldozer. And I mean, that's 3 guys had over 60 yards rushing last night, and Gabriel Watson had 8 carries for 33 yards there. I mean, that is exactly, if you can run, you can run. If you can run the ball, you can run the ball. I don't care if it's against Rice. I don't care if it's against our Sisters of the Poor. If you can run the ball, you can run the ball. And this is exactly what the offensive line needed in terms of getting that mindset. Like, okay, when we need to run the ball, we can do it. There's so much talent in that running back room. I mean, Jonathan Brooks, I mean, he looked great last night.
Well,
and that's the fourth guy.
And that's a touted guy, right? But that's a highly touted guy that, it almost, not to make this, comparison to like, a championship winning team, but you think about like that 05 winning team, that 05 national title winning team, where you had a guy like Jamal Charles and Ramonce Taylor that were like your like kind of third and fourth guys in that mix behind Selvin Young and like this these, they were, you know, but they're guys that eventually throughout their career became the number one guys. And that's what like Jonathan
Right.
Brooks is next in line. Bijan's not going to be a 5-year player at Texas as much as we'd love for him to be. He's not going to be,
Right.
Roshan's getting up towards upperclassman status. Keelan Robinson's a transfer. So you can see where that
Great.
who look great. But like Jonathan Brooks is that guy that in the next 2 seasons is going to be, and this is a credit to the recruiting, he's going to be one of those kind of like discussed as top running back in the Big 12 type players because he's that talented. He had that kind of prolific high school career that has allowed him to get up there. And it's great being able to have the opportunity to see these players early on and them get touches and to like kind of like with the quarterbacks, you mentioned you're going to need two quarterbacks. There's going to be situations where Jonathan Brooks might be called in to play in big, important downs. And, I'm hoping that's not the case because there's a lot of guys in front of him that should be getting those at this time. But so that would require those guys not being available to get those carries. But to have him back there is a big relief. And I think big things are coming for him. So,
yeah, I agree. And we talk about having that deep of a running back room and the packages where Bijan and Roshan Johnson are on the field at the same time. I'd like to see more of that. I didn't want to see it against Rice necessarily, but you saw the effectiveness of it in a small dose of what that sort of package is capable of. And you and I were both on the same page last night when we were discussing it about like, don't sleep on the fact that when Roshan Johnson came to campus, he was a quarterback.
and a good quarterback.
And a good quarterback. And the fact that they can put him in there in what is known as like a wildcat formation with non-quarterback skill position players taking a snap, the man can throw the ball. So that's going to be something that I'm really looking forward to see how that package develops with Robinson and Johnson both on the field at the same, Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson on the field at the same time. But also think about like having Bijan Robinson, Roshan Johnson, and then you send Keelan Robinson in motion across the formation. Like there's so
we saw
many
a jet
ways.
sweep. It looked like a jet sweep last night from Keelan. We've been asking for it. We've seen Texas get just butchered by the jet sweep over the years. We're like, why aren't we doing this?
Yeah.
And there it
so
was.
Again, like I'm anxious, especially seeing a little bit of it because you don't want to show your hand against Rice.
No.
Like Mike and I were talking after the game last night how you've seen exactly as much as you need to see so far. And you get through the first 3 games of your non-conference schedule of your first year as a head coach. You lose to a team that just punched you in the mouth, that you said could punch you in the mouth if your guys weren't, if you're not all there and you're not ready for that.
Right.
Like that, you got punched in the mouth and start on that. But again, now you're getting into the thick of your schedule that matters in terms of your conference schedule. And real quick, let's talk about the way that because these wide receivers are going to have to play a more important role as conference play goes on. It's just not going to be able to be, 40. How many carries was it?
God, 41.
41
attempts rushing.
That's not always going to be able to be the case, right? Like Bijan's probably going to be the bell cow. You're going to get Roshan to have a couple of carries in there. Keelan Robinson will get a couple of touches a game, but these wide receivers are going to have to play a larger role once this conference opened up or once conference play opens up. And I think that one of the few things that Sark tipped his hand on last night is who the guy is going to be, or at least could be, maybe even should be moving forward out of this wide receiver crew. And that was Xavier Worthy.
I've been so excited in touting him going back to camp for he was one of those ones where you started hearing the reports about him and like I was really buying into that because of the skill set that he brought. And his skill set is something that I feel like this team has been missing over previous seasons. And I think in our preview show we talked about like the players that if they have a great season who that would suggest that like things went really, really well. And for me, it was like, I think I mentioned Xavier Worthy is that guy for me on offense. Like we knew what we were going to get from Bijan, but if you can get a guy like Xavier Worthy, which last night, 7 catches, 88 yards and a touchdown, like really getting him involved because of the skill set that he brings is crucial. And I mean, he was far and away. I mean, Jared Wiley was the second leading, receiver with only 3 catches. I say only, but that was still, he was getting involved again. We're starting to see the guys that we've been talking about actually getting the run now. We've mentioned like where's Wiley been the last couple of weeks? He's banged up a little bit, but like, we mentioned the offensive line and these receivers, and I think like we were talking about last night and a little bit before the show today, the way that it looks like Sark and this offensive staff are addressing deficiencies with, I mean, not even addressing it. I think just the way that this team is constructed, the deficiencies are almost offset and help each other out in a way that's positive. It's the offensive line we mentioned, pass protection isn't great. Well, what helps that? The stable running backs that you have. You have receivers like Worthy, Dixon. I think Whittington fits into this group more than, being a downfield, long ball kind of guy. Marcus Washington, you have these guys that you can start getting involved in the short and intermediate passing game that you can move around to help out a quarterback that is decisive and can get the ball out quickly. Those things like the offensive line deficiency and not having like a true, like, downfield threats at receiver kind of help out this offense a little bit and saying like, hey, this is what we need to do. Focus on the running game, move guys around and get some chunk plays out of these short offensive calls. And I think last night it was positive for me because I think Sark said something this week about like, you kind of got, your ego got beat up after the Arkansas game. You kind of found out who you really were kind of thing. And like, I think last night was indicative of that. I think they've maybe tried to do some things against Arkansas that they thought they could get away with, that they thought they can do, and they realized they can't. And I think the game plan and the personnel that was utilized, you and Mike talked about, it's no coincidence Worthy had 7 catches and that he was the premier wide receiver focus last night. That I don't think that was an accident. You guys mentioned that, like that was not coincidence. I think they adjusted. I think all you want for your coaching staff is to be able to recognize deficiencies and adjust from week to week. Like, and that's what it looks like they're doing. Hey, we tried this and we realized we're awful at it. Let's not do that again. And then next week, let's adjust and let's keep trying to progress and develop. And if they can do this week to week, that's encouraging.
When you got guys that can make people miss in a phone booth, that helps too. When you can throw those short routes and then take a 2-yard catch and turn it into 8, take a 5-yard slant and turn it into 9 or 10 for a first down. Like, and you don't always have to. One of the things that I really wanted to see, I wanted to see a deep ball. I wanted to see some 9 routes. I wanted to see those fades. And we saw, and I kept asking as the game's going on, I'm looking at Mike and I'm saying, hey man, does Joshua Moore have a catch yet? Does Joshua Moore have a catch yet? Does Joshua Moore have a catch yet? And ended up getting one late in the game. But the best play that I thought that they called for Joshua Moore wasn't even a completion. It was just a straight up fade route that they showed that, okay, we're willing to throw this if we need to. And he almost made a nice play and came up with it. Didn't, it was good coverage. But again, like, that was my favorite Joshua Moore play last night, was an incompletion to him, just knowing that they're even considering letting him try to go deep and get behind the defense and make a play. So that they're going to need more of that, though. We saw a back shoulder fade last night for a touchdown. When's the last time you saw that on the 40 acres? Like, I mean, that
for Jared Texas Wiley, or against Texas?
Yeah, well, fair question. But Jared Wiley having, being the second leading receiver, I know it was only 3 catches, but that's probably the most catches Jared Wiley's had in the game in, I don't know, ever, in a couple of years at least. Like, I mean,
And
they haven't
that could
they
be an
haven't utilized
interesting,
that guy.
that could be an interesting look up on a stat there.
I mean, honestly, when's the last time Jared Wiley had more than a catch or two in a game? And that is exciting to me. And they were lining him up a lot of different places too. I mean, I know he's usually going to be right there on the line. I think one time they had him out in a bunch set out wide. Like, there are things, like, if you were watching and paying attention last night, you're seeing them lay the foundation for the evolution of this offense. The Arkansas game, I think you're spot on in the fact that we tried this, that's what you do in non-conference. You try a bunch of stuff that, okay, let's throw this stuff against the wall and see if this sticks. Are we good at this or not? They weren't good at a lot of that stuff against Arkansas. They nixed a ton of it. We didn't see a lot of that same beat your head up against the wall because this is what I am and this is what we do.
Exactly.
Sort of thing. You saw a coaching staff that was willing to make adjustments and do things that their quarterback is comfortable with, that their offense is comfortable with. And that, I mean, that to me, the groundwork was laid last night for the evolution of this offense this season. Again, I don't know if I still think this is an 8-win team, but the ceiling can be higher than that if this offense truly evolves into what it can be with its strengths, and the defense can just be good enough, because that's what it's going to take in the Big 12 against some pretty good teams, is just be good enough. But yeah, I mean, I was pleased with the offense last night. Again, we didn't learn anything that we didn't already know. The offensive line is still a problem. Christian Jones is still just
Okafor.
I keep waiting for Christian Jones to look like the starting left tackle at the University of Texas. Like, I keep waiting, and I know that he, with as much film as they have on these guys, what they are.
Well,
but maybe you can squeeze a little bit more out of them, and that's what I'm hoping for as this offense develops, especially as they understand exactly when you have hat against somebody in a different color shirt, what their strengths are, and
right.
and what their weaknesses truly are when you're going up against somebody that's not a scrimmage in practice against your own guys.
Well,
and that to me is the positive thing coming out of this.
Yeah, I think to be fair to this offensive line, I think while this coaching staff has had, historical film on them, that was film under a different scheme, the different coaching staff that was notoriously bad at development. And I think as they continue, again, we're week 3 under a new regime. And I think as Kyle Flood continues to get film on these guys in his scheme and seeing what their deficiencies are under his scheme, hopefully by the end of this season, like we're talking about just with the offense in general and with this coaching staff in general, we start to see that development come around. And maybe it doesn't work for some of these guys. Maybe they're too far along through their careers to really be redeveloped in a way. But if we start to see maybe guys get moved around, hey, maybe you're not the best fit in this spot now that we're seeing you in game time and we're seeing you with live bullets in our scheme. Maybe those things start to change a little bit. We'll see. But yeah, I think they kind of are what they are. And at least it's encouraging to see this coaching staff kind of coaching around that and coaching to hide it as much as they can. But I think for next week, I think this team's going to score points against Tech. So I don't even know if really next week is going to be enough to really tell us what this team really, at least on the offensive side of the ball, what this team really is. And it might not be till the trip to Fort Worth that we really go, okay, this is what this team is after 5 weeks.
Yeah, no, I'm
with
totally
a chip to
with
Dallas
you.
looming.
Totally with you. The TCU game is the
Right.
Is the one that I have circled right now to really, because obviously you don't want to overlook a Big 12 opponent, but I do think that they'll be fine against Tech. It's the TCU matchup against that defense and what Patterson brings to the table as a coach.
That defensive front, the way that those, they have some good DBs back there, that's going to tell us a lot.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I agree.
That said, I think what we will learn next week against Tech is where this defense is, because they pitched a shutout last night. fantastic. But again, the caveat, Rice, third quarterback played probably, I think he probably had the bulk of the snaps after the injuries. I know even their
Yeah.
fourth quarterback got some run, but I think, again, that caveat. But I think, so Luke Brockermeyer led the team with 6 tackles, which is encouraging to see. We start to see, you never want your DBs always being the guys leading in tackles, because that means that the offense is getting to the second, third level. So Brockermeyer kind of being the guy to like lead that is great. Ovi Agufo had 5 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. He had a sack, pass breakup. He was everywhere. I think he had a good night. Overshown had another workmanlike effort, four total tackles. Excuse me. And I think the defense did a good job. I think they did what they had to do. We started to see some guys get rotated in a little bit. Prince Dorba had a decent night. He had
Yes.
3 tackles. Tavondre Sweat was kind of a concern on the defense. I know he had that ankle issue. It looked like. I know he came back into the game, which is encouraging. That tells me that it's nothing serious. Hopefully he can be right and ready to go, because he's been really good this season on that defensive front. And would like to see, hopefully have him healthy for Tech. But I think we're going to learn a lot about this defense against Tech, and because Tech's pretty multiple. Like, I was looking at their stats from their game last night. I know they played, was it Florida International, and they had a big win. They distribute the ball a ton, and that's where the rushing yards were consistent. The passing, they have a lot of different ways. It's Tech. They have a lot of different ways to attack you. And this defense needs to be turned on, because this could be a high scoring affair in Austin next week. And I just think that we're going to learn everything we really kind of need to know about what this team's going to look like in league play, because it's the Big 12 team. If this team can't stop Tech, how can you, rely on what this unit can do in Dallas and against, name a team in the Big 12? They're going to all move the ball around, and hopefully they can, if they show what they did against Rice, against Tech, feeling better about it.
Ogofu is definitely, he looks like the playmaker, or he has been the playmaker up to this point for this defense. And I'm still trying to figure out if that's concerning. Like, not that I don't think guys, somebody stepping up and playing that well is a problem. I just feel like some of these other guys that we talked about in the preseason and coming out of fall camp, when they start making, Ojimo has been really almost, I don't want to say a non-factor, but
he kind of has.
I mean, he's a guy that I was super high on coming into this season. Somebody that I said was going to lead the team in sacks, was just going to be an absolute disruptor in the middle of that defense. And he hasn't looked that part just yet. Sweat getting hurt, and that didn't look good. Anytime you're talking about ankles with a guy of that size, you don't really like to talk about that. But the fact that he did come out, and he played limited after that too. They were very smart. The substitution patterns that this coaching staff has, I was actually pretty impressed with it last night. There were a couple of times that I wish they would have made the decision sooner, because there were a couple of plays that they weren't even set, and they were trying to get guys off and on and figure out what they wanted to do and stuff like that. But for the most part, I like the substitution patterns on defense, and the fact that they really dialed back Sweat's snaps, just knowing like, hey, all right, like, let's get him in certain spots. Let's give these guys a blow that are playing a bunch of snaps, but we're not going to push Tavondre Sweat here any more than we have to against Rice. And they didn't. And again, this is good coaching. This is how to use a roster. This is how to get all these guys as much playing time as possible to get them in game action in case, hey, down the road, you're going to need some of these cats on this defense. Injuries are going to happen. People are going to get tired. Like, it's is all going to happen. I feel like, I think Brandon Schooler forced a fumble after not getting the start. I think he was one of the ones that had a forced fumble.
He did, yeah.
Those are the kind of plays. Again, okay, I'm not gonna, okay, I didn't get to start, so I'm gonna get my dauber down. No, like he went out there and took advantage of the plays that he was given and had a decent game, made a couple of tackles, forced that fumble. That's what you need to see out of guys, not, oh, I'm just going to go out there and go through the motions, which is something that we've sort of been used to
Right.
recently with guys that aren't out there regularly, that think they should be out there regularly because they all think they should be playing. And it was really positive to me to see Schooler that Jaron Thompson
Yeah, he had a good night.
flies around.
Yeah.
Like, he's impressive to watch in person. That guy flies everywhere, and his nose is in everything all the time. So that was another positive if we're talking just in terms of guys that stood out to me. Brockermeyer did have quite a few tackles, but there were a couple of plays where it was pretty obvious to me that he just missed his gap, just missed his assignment completely, that led to some of Rice's bigger plays.
I wonder if there was some experimentation with the scheme a little bit last night that led to that. I wonder if there was something that, due to the way that the defense got gashed in the run game against Arkansas, that there were some adjustments. And I wonder if last night was kind of this isn't so much what we've worked on in preseason and leading up. We're going to make some adjustments and try some different things out and see how this goes. And I wonder if there's some of that led to like, oh, hey, I missed the gap, missed the assignment here because we're adjusting to some wrinkles in the scheme that maybe we didn't see to cover up some of those deficiencies in the run defense against Arkansas.
It's very possible. I just don't want to see that against Texas Tech and TCU.
No, of course,
know,
but you
like,
can get
and
away
that-
with that against Rice. Like you
Yeah,
can, can tweak those things and try and test it out to see how it looks.
And I think come here. You heading out, dude? Yeah. Hey, come here real quick. You want to say hi to Kerry? We're talking Longhorn football, man.
Hey, man, what'd you think of the Longhorn game last night?
It was good,
There we go. There we go. Is Texas going to beat Tech next week?
I think.
That's kind of how I feel too. I think they will. I think they will.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
Good seeing you, man.
Bye.
Good seeing you.
Thought we might get one of the dogs' predictions on the game here.
No,
something
sorry,
like
the
that,
dog.
you know?
The dog was being a little vocal after his little bit of a leg injury, so I had to grab him there. Apologies for that.
No.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, no, but I think Finley summed it up real nice there. Do you think is Texas gonna continue this consistency? I think so. And judging by as many players as they got playing time last night, you know, like that. I mean, it's good to get all that in there, but again, like, I think you made it. It's a good point to make in terms of schematics and trying out new things and trying to find ways to, okay, is this going to work? What happens if we do this with this? Maybe they told him, run here, do this, try this,
Yeah.
see what happens here, because it's Rice. We got somebody covering you here if you miss your assignment. But it was pretty blatant, I thought, on a couple of occasions there. And that was one of the biggest things that I had with this linebacking crew in years past was it just, you know, whether you're overrunning assignments, whether you're missing your gaps, whether you're any of those things that can cause big problems. I just don't want to see that consistently moving forward. And
Right.
I think they'll clean that up because, again, this coaching staff is going to, I say this a lot, but I truly feel like this is the staff that after Mac's peak years, this is already, I'm feeling like this is the first staff that truly understands putting the players into positions to be successful, not putting square pegs into round holes, not putting guys into positions that they necessarily aren't comfortable with or shouldn't be doing. Like, those are the sort of things that I think we're going to continue to see. But we got to get more production out of some of these guys that we've been expecting production from. And I don't know
Coburn.
if that starts on exactly. Yeah. Coburn if it starts on the defensive line, then it needs to start on the defensive line. But yeah, is there any other takeaways for you on this defense?
No, I mean, I think it was good to see a lot of guys get some playing time that showed some promise. And I mean, yeah, I think, again, it was a positive kind of like, after what happened in Fayetteville, a positive way for them to come back and get their confidence back up and pitch a shutout. And I think having that confidence is going to be key for what they're able to do against Tech next week. I mean, it's going to be a challenge. So there we go.
A
I
little
love
too
it.
sweet action in there.
I
A
love
little
it.
too sweet. Y'all be safe.
But yeah, I think,
Bye.
that's interesting. You mentioned like putting guys in the best positions to succeed. I think that's a good way to transition a little bit into just a quick hit on special teams, which I don't think, we don't typically talk a ton of special teams, but I think what Keelan Robinson did on special teams last night with the punt block
Yes.
was that did harken back to the Mac Brown days of putting the best athletes on special teams units. It's like when like the story about having Roy Williams on special teams. You put your best players out there. It's Mac really emphasized success on special teams, and the previous coaching staffs haven't. And that's where,
None.
having a guy like Keelan Robinson, who's just, I mean, what an athlete, and having a guy like that who's willing, comes in as a transfer from Alabama, knows he's going to be behind Bijan Robinson in the pecking order for, as the running back room, but a guy that's just willing to do that lays out there to block a punt, then does what he does on the offensive side of the ball. Like, that's what you need. And I think having those athletes out there to do that is amazing. That shows me that there's some buy-in in terms of what, it's really easy for players of that skill level to be like, I don't want to do special teams. I don't want to do that. I want to get the ball. I want to play on the offensive or decent defensive side of the ball. But yeah, I think that, and I think also a nice little touch was in terms of special teams, having Bert Auburn kick last night. I mean, looking at the kickoff numbers, he was a half yard lower in average kickoff than Dicker was. Dicker had 5 kickoffs. He averaged 65 apiece. Auburn had 4 kickoffs, 64.5 apiece. And there were no field goal attempts from Auburn, but he was 3 for 3 on extra points. Dicker 5 for 5. That's what you want to see. But I think it was interesting that he got as much run as he did. And I don't think Dicker's at risk of losing his job. But I think the fact that Sark wanted Bert Auburn to kick in live game action as much as he did maybe suggests like that Dicker needs to tighten it up a little bit. He has, I think we mentioned this before, he's kind of regressed a little in terms of his efficiency. And so that was encouraging. That was encouraging to kind of, whether that's kind of a mental game that Sark is playing with Dicker a little bit, or however he's playing it, kind of say like, hey, this is not like every position's open for competition here.
Message sent, right? Like,
yeah.
That's really that to me, that's exactly what that means. It's messages sent. Like, hey, if you're not going to do this, we got another guy that is already, and the fact that Auburn went through and he made all 3 of his extra points. He did have the 1 touchback on the kickoff. I know that's the difference between Dicker and Auburn. That's the difference between Dicker and Auburn on those kicks, is that Dicker, you never get a return.
Dicker was 5 for 5 touchbacks out of those kickoffs, where Auburn was 1 for 4. So while the average distance was only a half-yard difference, that does make a difference, because you're talking about 3 returnable kicks versus 0.
Yeah, and that's because you don't count the yardage when it bounces into, out of the back of the end zone. You don't get those extra 10 yards on your kick average there. But that's that to me is the obvious difference. But we did see good pursuit on the kickoffs. That has been recently a bugaboo, kickoff coverage, and you just expecting somebody to get out of their lane. And again, it's Rice. I get that. Once you
it just takes one.
Some kick returns, but yeah, exactly. And
it just takes one.
I thought that they did a nice job with that. Excuse me. On their kickoff coverage when Auburn was kicking, and again, like, message sent. We got another kicker on the roster. We're not afraid to use him. Don't screw it up. Like,
yep.
You're kicking for your job. Like, and that's okay to have that. It's okay to be able to say, hey man, like, you need to sharpen up. Otherwise, we're going to run this long hair out here and he's going to take your job from you, And Auburn did. He did the job.
You have
He
some
did
damn
the
hippie
job.
taking your job, boy.
He did the job. So I mean, yeah, that was great. I thought again, seeing the rotations across the board. I mean, even on the kickoffs, that wasn't the first kickoff team that was out there. Those were the normal guys. There were guys that were out there like, okay, if you're the backup to this guy on the kickoff team, you're on next time. And let's go see how you do. I really liked the rotation of players yesterday. The one thing, and this is one thing that I forgot to touch on the offense before we sort of move on to talking about Tech real fast. I wish I would have seen more rotation on the offensive line in the first half. You know, sticking with that same five and I get it. You're in a rhythm. You get rolling and you're comfortable with that and it's looking good and you're feeling good. And it's like, okay, well, let's not mess with this. I really would have liked to see Kerry a little bit in the first half, specifically at left tackle. But again, like when it's rolling and it's working, you go with what's working. But yeah, no, I love the rotations of the players. Other than that, because they told us there was going to be a rotation on the offensive line, there really wasn't.
Well,
It
no,
was
they're
just
not on the
wholesale
offensive line. Yeah.
It was just wholesale changes at the, once they sort of went to the second team there, and they really did that starting offensive line didn't play another snap after that. None of those starters did. And you got to see a lot of guys in there that we hadn't seen play really much, if at all. And that was really what I was trying to see, having Logan Parr play some center. Kerry was in there at left tackle. Rafidi Gramati was in there a little bit. Like Gramai, I mean, there were some guys that got to see the field yesterday that I was pretty excited about seeing. I wish they would have been in different spots maybe, but I understand not wanting to take some of those chances. Were there any other rotations that, before we sort of wrap this up, that you would have wanted to see?
No, I think I'm on the same page with you there with the offensive line, but I think that goes to show that they recognize the work that needs to be done with that as a unit. And I think that it's, hey, if we need to get these guys as many reps as possible to really get this scheme right and get these guys on the same page, I think that was indicative of that. I think if they were happier with the overall play of the offensive line, then we probably would have seen more individual rotation. And I think that's and I'm fine with that. If that's the case, then I'm okay with that. I would have liked to see some rotation, but I think that I also want these guys to get more reps, get this scheme figured out and figure it out. And so I'll take,
something to
I
be said about
understand it.
that for sure.
Yeah, I understand it. I'll take that. But yeah, man, real quick, let's hit on next week. Tech coming to town, 11 a.m. kick. I haven't seen a point spread for this yet. I'd imagine Texas will be favored, although Tech has had a decent start to the season. Their significant, their kind of notable win was over U of H, who is, I mean, future Big 12 opponent for them. Not a pushover. It's not the better teams of previous U of H seasons, but this one's going to be a challenge. I think it's going to be a shootout, and I'll kind of wait to see what this point spread looks like. But I think, I don't know, Texas should be favored by probably a touchdown or something like that. But I think this will be a high scoring game. And this is where I think the defense needs to win a game, because I think Casey Thompson and this Texas offense will move the ball, but so will Tech. And who's going to be able to get the stops? And I think Texas will, but we don't know until we see it, right? So
yeah, feeling good about that too right now. Feeling good about taking care of business against Texas Tech. Again, like, don't want to overlook a team in conference play, especially a conference opener. But I think TCU is the one that I've had circled, the one I'm looking forward to the most, to see exactly where. And Texas Tech that game will hopefully be another opportunity to learn a little bit more about what they do well against a good opponent, start to really fine tune the schemes on both sides of the ball, and figure out who those guys are going to be moving forward.
Yeah,
that are going to be the ones to lead you.
Yeah, I've got that TCU game circled as kind of my first loss for the Horns in this season, going back to the preview show. And I think if the Tech game has the feel of I don't want to call it like a stepping stone kind of game, but if the Tech game kind of feels like, okay, they took what they improved on with the Rice game and they're taking that next step in terms of development and scheme, there's more wrinkles. They seem to be taking that next step up, and maybe I'm feeling better about the matchup against TCU. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if they struggle with Tech and this kind of looks like a step backwards, then which is hopefully not the case, because we've seen, really positive game against Louisiana, then a big step back against Arkansas, then a big step back forward against Rice. If they can take another step forward against Tech and look more improved and more focused, keep playing disciplined and clean, then I'm feeling better about that Arkansas game maybe being a little bit more of an outlier in terms of the grand scheme of things. But if they take a step back and kind of look out of sorts against a better team, then a better team than Rice is what I'm getting at, and that's going to be a little discouraging, but I think they should handle business. I just want to see what it looks like. The eye test, we talk about it all the time. If they look buttoned up and ready to go, then we could have ourselves a pretty good game in Fort Worth in 2 weeks.
I think we will. I think we're gonna. I don't expect, I think the letdown has happened. I'm not, again, obviously I'm anticipating this team losing a handful of games still over the rest of the season, and I think you are too. But that Arkansas game was just such a total, absolute letdown from an effort perspective, from a schematic perspective. And again, if that's what happens and you're moving forward, then you learn from that and you take that, then it's worth it to me, especially because for the second game that a coach is on campus, to be able to, okay, yeah, let's throw that out because it doesn't really necessarily indicate what's to come. But if you're not learning from that, then that's where the issues will come. And especially in a conference too, the Big 12 hasn't exactly looked like world beaters at this point.
No.
And so, but again, it's preseason. There aren't exactly a ton of national title contenders in this conference. Oklahoma hasn't looked the sharpest. They've got some depth issues. They've on both sides of the ball.
And your guy, Spencer Rattler, hadn't looked as my
guy.
He hadn't looked as, the part quite yet, but
no, he hasn't.
But I just want to real quick emphasize what you just said. In the grand scheme of things, with what this team wants to achieve this year, that Arkansas game doesn't really mean anything.
Nah.
If it really doesn't, because given what the Big 12 looks like and given what this team's goals are and given kind of the expectations, if this team was going after national title, expectations in competition this year, then yeah, the Arkansas game blows that all apart. That's not the expectation this year. This is not a team that people are saying this is going to be a playoff contending, fighting for the playoff type team. This is can we compete for the conference? The Arkansas game, win or lose, doesn't have any bearing on where Texas finishes in the Big 12 race. It's a non-conference game. Obviously, you want to win it. It's a historic rival and a renewed rivalry coming with the SEC move. You obviously want to win that game. But it doesn't have any bearing on where this team finishes and where they compete in the Big 12. Yep. And that's what starts on Saturday. And that's where you're right. If there was a time to learn about this team, how they react getting punched in the mouth, how do they fit into your scheme, all those various things that we've been discussing, that was the time to figure it out. Instead of figuring it out in Fort Worth, or instead of figuring it out against Tech at home and getting punched in the mouth in the conference opener, because then you're set back. Then you're starting league play already on the back foot. And so, as bad as that Arkansas loss was, if you're looking for any kind of sunshine out of that, it's that it ultimately doesn't matter. And if this team puts together and ends up in the Big 12 championship game, then people will look back at that Arkansas game and go, okay, that was the outlier. And that's where Sark figured out what he kind of had at that moment. And they've been able to take it and run with it. But in the micro view of all this, the Rice game shows that they did take what happened in Fayetteville to heart and have made the adjustments. Now let's see it against Tech. Let's see if they can continue to figure out what they've got with this team. Keep going back to what you said about previous staffs about trying to fit square pegs into round holes. And if they're making those adjustments and they're learning each week and adjusting to that, then I feel a lot better about this coaching staff than I have previous ones.
Absolutely.
And what a
I'm with you
concept.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Putting guys that do things well into positions to do those things well. Wow.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
Imagine that. Imagine that.
Who would have thought? But, well, man, let's wrap this thing up. We had some Austin FC action this week, but they've been so bad. And last night's game against San Jose was another 3-1 lead in the second half blown, losing 4-3. Still bottom of the table. And I don't know what Josh Wolf is doing most of any of these matches, but expansion team, man. But we're about positive sports experiences here. We're about PSE. So we're not going to get into that much and, ruin all of our fine viewers Sundays here. So we won't get into that.
No.
So hopefully
Not
we have
this
some
time around
positive,
anyway.
yeah, hopefully we have some positive sports experience discussion for Austin FC next week. But yeah, man, we
Yeah.
got a game against Tech. Let's see how it goes. And we'll be back here next week breaking it down. So
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, good stuff against Rice. Let's see if they can continue to evolve. Evolution is the key in this first season for Sarkisian. Let's see if they can
Exactly.
continue to do it. So thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate you guys sticking around. Always clicking like and subscribe and doing all those things that you do. Appreciate y'all. And we'll see you next week.
absolutely. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
Welcome.
ATX representing. Fatal, baby.
All in 06 on a Saturday. Can the drip and swing down Lemon